Unfortunately, this is not up to us. It's because we're not allowed to do anything else.
Elon Musk is no stranger to controversy, or lawsuits for that matter. But this one is different. I'd be willing to bet you've never had a judge force you to buy a social media company for $44 billion. But if you work in the United States, this affects you. This time, Elon made a simple mistake. A misconception that lots of people believe. And it's led to some pretty big legal troubles for SpaceX. Let's time travel back to 2016. SpaceX has made history by landing the first stage booster of their Falcon 9 rocket onto a ship out in the Atlantic. Pretty cool, right? More recently though, a botched launch resulted in the complete loss of a rocket, its payload, and even the launch complex.
That's gonna leave a mark.
So despite much success, SpaceX still had their share of struggles. On a late September day, Elon is a speaker at the International Astronautical Congress in Mexico. During a Q&A session, an audience member rises to her feet and asks,
"You're going interplanetary, but you're not going international. When are you going to hire people from other countries than the US?"
All right, pause for a second. How about you? Have the companies you've worked for been good about hiring people from lots of different countries? Or do they pretty much stick to hiring US folks exclusively? Let me know in the comments. All right, let's see how Elon responds.
Yeah, so I think people are a bit confused about this. Unfortunately, this is not up to us. So the U.S. government regulations, they make getting a job in the U.S. hard as it is, just getting a job visa hard as it is. But if you're working on rocket technology, that's considered an advanced weapons technology. So even a normal work visa isn't sufficient.
I mean, he's not wrong. Since SpaceX works with some pretty cool technologies, they have to follow the international traffic in arms regulations. A rocket that's capable of launching a satellite into space isn't too different from a missile. But even outside of cutting-edge defense work, every company operating in the US has to follow the Export Administration regulations. And although these do tend to be less restrictive than the ITAR, both sets of rules control what items and information can and can't be exported from the US. But David, hiring an employee isn't an export, right? Well, actually, both the ITAR and EAR have something called a deemed export. This is where you provide export-controlled information to a foreign person in the US, even if that person is a co-worker at the same company. So Elon and SpaceX are on the right track by realizing that US companies have to be thoughtful and careful when hiring a foreign person. But why does this video from 2016 matter today? And how does it really affect me? I'm glad you asked. On August 23, 2023, the Department of Justice filed a suit against SpaceX for violating the Immigration and Nationality Act. And the video we just watched is a major element behind DOJ's complaint. Why? You see, the suit references a lot of ordinary actions taken by regular employees. But I think these really stem from a misconception held by the company's leadership that ended up flowing through the organization. And just so you know, these aren't unique to SpaceX or even its industry. Many of these same issues could crop up at any business. So let's hear where things start to go wrong.
So even a normal work visa isn't sufficient unless you get a special permission from the Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of State.
He's partially right. The Department of Commerce and the Department of State both have something called a Foreign Person Employment License. It allows a company to get approval for a foreign person to work with export-controlled technologies at a U.S. company. But in order to avoid the compliance risk and effort associated with managing this type of license, a lot of companies involved with export-controlled technologies will only hire U.S. persons. So while Elon has been mostly right up to this point,
well, it just so happens that your friend here is only mostly
right. Here's where everything really goes awry.
I want to be clear, this is not out of some desire of SpaceX to just hire people with green cards. It's because we're not allowed to do anything else.
This is the root of the problem. DOJ alleges that SpaceX set up their hiring practices to limit employment to only U.S. citizens and permanent residents, aka green card holders. This, the government claims, resulted in discrimination against those granted asylum, as well as refugees in the U.S. Here's a tweet from June of 2020 that further supports DOJ's case. And since it was from 4 years after the video was posted, they're making the case that this was a long-term, systemic problem at SpaceX. So what do the regulations actually say about all this? What's the right answer? While the words are slightly different, the EAR and the ITAR define a U.S. person this way. U.S. person means any individual who is a citizen of the United States, a lawful permanent resident, or a protected individual. While U.S. citizens and permanent residents were covered by company policy, it seems that SpaceX forgot about protected individuals. This includes people admitted to the U.S. as refugees and those who have been granted asylum. The Justice Department's suit clearly highlights the fact that these people have an equal right to live and work, the same as citizens and green card holders. So what is this all going to mean for SpaceX? Well, we don't know yet. DOJ's proposed penalty includes the following: a fine for each case of someone being improperly screened out, payments to each applicant who was turned away, requiring SpaceX to hire applicants who were qualified for employment, and even back pay, with interest, for those candidates. While we don't know how this will all turn out, it's clear that this could have a big impact on the company. So what should we learn from this? And how can you make sure that the same thing doesn't happen to you? Number 1. Every person in every company operating in the U.S. needs to understand what a U.S. person is. In practical terms, it's totally okay for your coworker to be an asylee or refugee, as well as a permanent resident or U.S. citizen. 2. Anyone in human resources or involved at all in the recruiting, selection, or hiring processes needs to be even more aware of the rules. And finally, 3. Company culture is really important. I have every reason to believe that SpaceX as a whole understands the requirements around these definitions. But words truly matter, especially when spoken or tweeted by those at the top. So try and think of some practical ways you can help to get this knowledge out in your company. And please share your ideas with me and the rest of the community in the comments. Thank you so much for watching and sticking with me this far. It really means a lot. If you like this type of content, it would really help if you would please consider subscribing. Please also share the video with anyone who might benefit from this information. But maybe you're interested in hearing a bit more about what the ITAR is and how it applies to you. If so, please take a look at the video I've linked over here. Or here. Or wherever YouTube decides to put it on your screen. I hope you have a great morning, afternoon, or evening. Whatever time it is where you are. But remember, if you ever have a question, go ask David.